Okay, good evening, all. Thank you for joining us on the Start with the End in Sight seminar. This one I find actually very interesting. I find all of our seminars interesting, to be honest. But this one is one that I've dabbled in terms of the subject matter a bit. But I'm so glad to have subject matter experts here with me today. And they're going to give us some great knowledge to help us out going forward. Um, so start with the end in sight. Let's just, what is that? You probably saw the little blurb about what we're going to be talking about today. And it said something like, yeah, do you have an exit strategy? What is an exit strategy? That's my first thought. But then it says, do you know what your business is worth? Learn the importance of having an exit strategy. And I'm going to skip over that and understand how valuing your business correctly can impact your exit strategy. Sounds like all good stuff. We've got Kumi Bradshaw here, and we have Leon Bascom, we also have Dennis Carter, my partner there, my colleague from the BEDC. Dennis is going to be fielding questions, and this is a good time to talk about where questions are going to come from. You will see that you have a chat. If you have any questions that you would like to pose to one of our distinguished guests, then please do so in the chat. Dennis will pick that up and throw it in. The format today will be question and answer. So Q&A. We have put together about 10 or 15 questions ourselves. Feel free to jump in at any time with the question of your own. I'll try to DJ those bad boys so that we make it nice and smooth. So without further ado, 5:30, I know everybody has stuff to do. I think we should kick off. Let me get my questions. I've got two screens here, so if I'm not looking at the camera, don't mind me, because I am doing that, looking at screens. All right, so first and foremost, let me talk a little bit about Kumi and Leon. Gosh, I'm speeding here. All right, so first, let's I got a little bio for good old great Leon. Let me read it for you. Mr. Bascom, Leon Bascom, is a Bermudian and has worked in the insurance reinsurance industry for over 20 years. He has worked in Bermuda and Dublin, Ireland, in various senior positions. Mr. Bascom worked as AVP at Taurus Insurance, Ally World, and Axel Capital. Mr. Bascom is also a serial entrepreneur with a vast array of experience, which he is always willing to share with young and seasoned thinkers, creators, and disruptors. He has owned 3 restaurants, a cyber cafe, and has even driven a gypsy cab. There you go, entrepreneur. You got to do what you got to do. Anyway, today, Mr. Bascom is the CEO and one of the founders of Moongate Group. You guys would know about that. Moongate Group is out there just below us, actually, in our headquarters on Church Street, Sophia House, which has been in existence since 2013. He is responsible for overseeing the day-to-day management of the company, including staffing, product development. He does a whole bunch of stuff. And he's great. He's always assisting us in stuff that we need. Moongate has played a pivotal role in the health insurance industry by providing a niche product, the Health Gap Supplement. If you don't know about it, check it out. To those clients who have basic health plans such as HIP and Future Care. So if you have HIP or Future Care, we know that it's not as souped up as some of the other health insurance products. And if you want to, kit it out with some additional stuff to boost it, then you're going to check Leon. He is working on a new product, which he hopes the company will fully launch in March 2021. He doesn't say what that is. Now I'm excited. See, he's trying to put this suspense thing on us right there. Okay, very good. That's Kumi. That's Leon. Now, moving over to Kumi. Kumi's vibe is he gets straight to the point. So these are two different vibes, right? You got one, look, pink. Look, he's got his pink tie, pink shirt, looking absolutely dapper. Kumi gets right to the point. Kumi has his firm is called Firm Advisory Limited. Now, what is this? It's summed up in just a few words. We help Bermuda companies measure, grow, and harvest business value. So, in a nutshell, that's saying that he's an expert in all of what we're talking about today. All right, got that out of the way. Anything else, guys, I need to say before I mess up something else? No, we're good? Then nice. All right, first question in the Q&A session. Okay. It is, first and foremost, what is an exit strategy? I'll throw that out there. What is an exit strategy? What are we talking about?
Should I start off? Yeah.
Please.
Okay. I mean, one of the great things that we have now is called Google. and an exit strategy can actually mean so many different things to so many different people. But I did want to get sort of like a holistic idea of even, what the internet was going to say about it. And this is the closest description that I got to it, was that it's basically an entrepreneur's strategic plan to sell their ownership in a company to investors or another company. An exit strategy gives a business owner a way to reduce or liquidate their stake in a business. And if the business is successful, make a substantial profit. I thought that was really interesting, and this topic, and Dante, I think you in the BEDC for this topic. Exit strategies is probably some of the hardest things that an entrepreneur can face, because you never go into business thinking that I want to get out of it, because we put so much effort into it. You have to realize that at some stage there has to be an endpoint, and I think that I give credit to the BEDC for bringing this out, because not many entrepreneurs think about it. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's what it is. It's either voluntarily or involuntarily getting away or selling a stake in your business.
Thank you. Kumi, did you want to add to that?
Sure, I can. I have maybe a little bit less formal perspective. I sort of look at things like, if you're in business, in very plain language, you're there to create value and to extract value. When you can only extract value in two different ways from a business as a business owner. One, you can extract value while the business is operating, and two, you can extract value when you exit the business. It's critically important to understand that how you set up your business, operate your business, and have everything put together. That way, you can maximize your extraction of value at the end of the day. And that's sort of the whole point of, I think, this. That's the summary, I guess, of this whole Q&A presentation thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I have a few friends who have companies that in the U.S. And in Europe, U.S. particularly, and they actually started with the end in sight. When I say start with the end in sight, they created this company. It was in the tech space. It was an app, and they had no intention to die with this business. They had every intention to sell the business once they reach certain metrics and a certain level of success, which was unknown at the time. But the hope was, if we get to this point, we would be quite willing to sell the business and extract that value. What you're talking about, Kumi. Sorry, it looked like you was going to say something.
Oh, I was actually looking at Leon's screen. But also just to note, exit strategy is important even with family-held businesses, as far as passing down businesses down through the generations, etc. It's just a matter of basically, we're not going to be married to this thing for our entire lives, and at some point we're not going to be here. So what happens when we're not here? Because if we don't start to manage that process, let's say something, God forbid, something unfortunate happens to the business owner, it would really sucks a technical term. It would really suck to have broken your back for years and years, and then the business just fades away, or all that's left is a husk and some machines.
Yeah, 100%. They get it. All right, so we got a sense of what an exit strategy is. If anybody has any comments, again, guys, chuck something in the chat. I sell steam on ahead. Why should I have it? Okay, next question. Why should I have an exit strategy before I start a business? After all, I do not plan to fail. Now, this may be redundant, but do you see any value in answering this question? If not, say, Dante, that's all. Let's move on.
So the question is, after all, I do not plan to fail.
Why should I have an exit strategy before I start a business?
Before you start.
Because in terms of, I don't know what happened here. Can you guys still see me? Okay.
Yes,
I think I pressed something. In terms of starting a business, why would you want to have ending the business or the end in sight from the term? Because I think looking at this and the exit strategy and whatnot, albeit now we know what an exit strategy is somewhat, I think it will come out a little bit more in terms of the definition and helping everybody to understand. Some people might think, I don't plan to fail, so why should I have an exit strategy? Just to reinforce the point.
Yeah, I think it was an interesting way that question was phrased, because an exit strategy doesn't necessarily mean that it's associated with failure.
Yes.
People have various reasons why they would want to exit a business, and Kubi had brought up a valid point. If you want to extract value out of it, I mean, there are some businesses, just like how you said, in the tech space, because the tech space, it moves very quickly. There may be times that, listen, we have to develop this app or we have to develop this technology very quickly and try to get it, functional to the point that we can sell it off. There are product life cycles for various different things that are out there. So, it really depends in terms of what a person wants to do. So an exit strategy is not necessarily synonymous with failure. As a matter of fact, I think it's the opposite. If it's something that you say that, this is where I want to get it to before I let it go. Again, some people are serial entrepreneurs. They build a business and then they sell it off. They go and build a business again, they sell it off. I work for some guys who were in the insurance space, and one of the executives, he helped to build up Excel, and when it got to a certain point, he took his millions and he went and started Max Capital. So it's a very similar thing in the sense that individuals can say, well, I want to get the business to a certain point and then sell it off so that I can go and do something else. So it's not associated necessarily with failure.
Okay.
I would strongly agree with Leon. In fact, again, an exit strategy is just a plan, and to not plan with the amount of commitment that's required to both start and to run a business, whether one's acquiring a business or one starting a business from scratch, would not be advisable from my perspective. And maybe one of the questions is this really a business or is it self-employment? Because I think Leon and I are both talking about businesses as opposed to things where people are just looking for, they are getting paid for work for which they're doing, but this is not necessarily something that's saleable or that's transferable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so I'm going to answer my next question myself because you just answered it. But I think it's important just to get these things out there. I've already started. This was the next question, but I'm going to say it anyway. I have already started my business. is it too late to formulate an exit strategy? And I think what we're hearing right now is that no, it's not. And I'll leave it there, and we're gonna dive deeper, because I think this is a tease for a lot of people. It's like, okay, I'm getting to understand what an exit strategy is. Great. Now, what's next? How do I figure out what's best for me? And how do I execute that? So we're going to get there, guys. Just looking at the plethora of questions I have. Let me see which one I can DJ next.
Go to the next one.
Yeah, go to the next one.
Yeah. Okay. So part of this seminar, it's about the valuation of your business. So we're going to move into that space. I posed the question like this, and I'm going to say it in a second, but you guys can remix it if you want. I don't intend to sell my business. It will be a family business and passed on to my children. Why would I need to know the value of my business? Or do I need to know the value of my business? In fact, why should I know the value of my business at all?
Can I speak to this? May I speak to this?
Sure.
Absolutely.
And Leon, I don't know, do you guys offer life insurance products?
Not the life insurance product. We were doing it in the early days, but we got away from that. But I knew where you're going with this. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So the very big, the starting point is, let's look at the business like any asset that's not liquid, right? And businesses are, privately held businesses in Bermuda are going to be very illiquid. So we've all heard the stories of the Bermuda families that have a house or a couple houses or whatever, and it's something left by Aunt Maybelle, whomever, who doesn't have any children, and leaves it to the different, forget even to her children, right? To the nieces and nephews and whatnot and grandchildren, and the house deteriorates and gets shut, and the value of it gets totally thrown away, right? It's got dandelions growing in the roof and so on and so forth. One of the first things that, and a friend of mine and I were talking the other day about estate planning, as he's doing some estate planning himself. It's critically important if one has multiple, and I'm not an estate lawyer, what have you, and people can speak to their estate lawyers or speak to other professionals around this. But it's critical to have some idea of allocation of value, of the values in the estate, if one's looking to divvy things up, and to avoid sort of the post bereavement, no longer being invited to Christmas dinners and all that type of foolishness that goes on. That's a start. And that's just from a family sort of
Planning.
Yeah, from a family perspective. Beyond just that, there is a strong correlation between maximizing business value and like maximizing what you can sell a business for or exit a business for, and maximizing the amount of economic value you can actually harvest from a business while you're operating it. So, for example, Leon's talked about some of his ventures from before, and I'm sure he would agree. If he can maximize the amount of profits he's able to harvest on an annual basis from his business, he can sell his business for more, right? So you can get a whole bunch more money at the end, and while he's holding on to it and operating it, he's also putting more away into his pocket. So just from a basic business strategy perspective, it can be very important to get an external perspective on the levers, the operating levers that create economic value in your business. And that's what evaluation should be giving you some perspective on. It shouldn't just be a number. It should be understanding, it should help the business owner understand how they're actually creating economic value in their business.
So it's interesting too, because now we're getting to understand a little bit more about this crazy title, Start with the End in Sight, right? Not crazy, but I think intuitive. So I say that because, all right, so when you're starting a business, you need to understand how you build value in your business, because building value in your business is a major asset. Something that something that, yes, it's read through your balance sheet somewhat, but maybe maybe not totally. For instance, some value could be your client base, and focusing on building a client base that, you can't necessarily, well, sometimes it can be tangible and you can put it on your balance sheet, but sometimes not. You can't say, well, look, I have 30,000 users, or 30,000 clients, and they potentially buy, there's about 25% of them that purchase on a monthly basis. You can somewhat put that in balance sheet, but not really, not really. But it's important to understand that reaching certain targets can add value to your business, albeit you cannot necessarily put it on your balance sheet. But it's one of those things that when you're selling a business, holds a lot of value.
Yeah,
Okay.
can I just add something very quickly? It's sort of like an adjunct to what was discussed, but your question was sort of like about family, passing something down to the family. And one of the things I found it very interesting, because being seasoned, I've seen a few instances where people have the intention to pass it down to family members, and either the family members were never involved from the start, and as Kumi had given you the analogy of a house being, eroding in value, a very similar thing can happen in terms of you just passing it over to a family member, and they are reducing the value because they're not intricately involved in the business. And it's very important that when people do make decisions like that, they have their children or their siblings involved in the business for some time, so that it can retain that value. And that's the thing that I wanted to add to that, because you've seen numerous instances in Bermuda where that's happened, that you think that you're gonna pass it on to the kids, and the kids are like, no, I just want to live off of this. They're enjoying living off of the money. I'm even thinking of my own son. He has no intention of getting involved in insurance stuff. And so, yeah, we have to have our own discussions in terms of what we're going to do. But yes, people have passed businesses over to family members, and they have, and Kumi probably attest that they've gone to the wayside. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Leon, that's an awesome, thank you for catching that. Because succession planning really is part of exit planning as well, right? And it's not even just necessarily that people might be interested or not interested. They may just not have the skill sets or the necessary attributes.
Yeah, I meant to say
that. And so in such a situation, and then exit planning may also be tied to estate planning, right? It's weird how all this stuff, it's just planning, right? The fact of the matter is, I know that, for example, let's say I had a family member who wanted to pass on to me an envelope folding company, right? I couldn't think of anything more boring for me than envelope folding. Right. It'd be much better for them and for me and for everybody involved if they were to just figure out what the value of that business was, sell that business off, and give me my little portion of the proceeds. You know what I mean? So I didn't have to deal with envelope folding, because that's not a fit for me. I'm being silly, but you get the idea.
No, I like that. I mean, the beautiful thing about this is that we're getting more surgical, more detailed in terms of why an exit strategy. It's coming out through the questions. You guys are doing phenomenal. Again, listeners, if you have additional questions, if you want to dive deeper in one of the questions or response, please do write into the chat, and we can field those and answer that. But no, I'm loving it so far. So let's move on. Okay. Now, the big one, or one of the big ones. how do you value a business? You know, I want to sell or buy a business, but I'm sure if the asking price is reasonable. Got a business I want to sell. I say, yeah, 300,000. Bam, sounds good. You know, if I'm selling, how do I come up with that value? If I'm buying, how do I analyze that value? I throw it out there.
I'll defer to the expert.
All right. I'll do my best to speak to it, and I'll try to be somewhat structured. First of all, I would argue that there is never one value for a business. And so immediately, the first thing I think about is, I think about the water, for example, that Leon's drinking. And Leon, if you had a bottle of water, how much would you pay for a bottle of water right now?
Right now, I would pay $1.99.
Okay. At the end of May 24th, right? You've done your however many miles. How much would you pay for that bottle of water?
Take whatever out of my pocket.
Just take my money. See?
Just take my money. It doesn't matter.
So that's one of the things I want to communicate is that value. The value is very much a matter of, I think of it like two Venn diagrams. You have what the buyer is looking to sell for and what the seller is looking to buy for. But it's not just the buyer and seller. There are other parties that are involved in the value proposition when you start looking at business transactions. One of the key parties is going to be your financing source, right? Because if you can't get the funding, this is one of the challenges we face locally, is if you have a restricted number of sources of funding, and if funding is more expensive or funding is less available, necessarily the actual transaction price may be less than preferred by the seller. Of course, the seller can start to address some of those things through structuring the deal, structuring the transaction, and maybe looking at creative ways to finance and so on and so forth. So I'm sort of moving around a lot because I'm really trying to explain the values is sort of a concept that's not just, it's very difficult to pin down to just one number. Now, if I'm called in, for example, for a valuation situation, engagement, and there is a legal matter, for example, or a shareholder matter, then we start to look at a bunch of different factors. Obviously, we'll look at the past, the historical performance of the business. You'll look at the expected future economic performance of the business. You'll look at the perceived risks, right? And notice I used not the word risks, but perceived risks. So again, how much is a restaurant worth in Bermuda on, let me think about the dates now. In last year, this time last year, as opposed to this time this year. A restaurant this time last year previously was making $200,000 a year, $300,000 a year in profits. Now this time this year, we can still look at what it used to make, but the restaurant's been shut down. Is somebody going to pay the same amount of money for that business now with the information we have now about the challenges that are out there for the hospitality industry? I would suggest likely not. So yes, there's science and there's art. One of the key things in looking at when one's performing evaluation is actually looking way beyond just the financial information, but looking at the operating environment, looking at the actual operations of the entity itself, and looking at your separation of, for example, the unique business owner versus being able to replace them from an arm's length perspective. So another thing is, and sorry, I'm jumping in. There's a book, look, there's more information on our website, which can be downloaded, and there's a book out there, etc. So I want to be careful not to overwhelm with information. But one of the things that can be looked at, for example, is if let's say this example, if Leon's looking to sell his business at some point, and if he's looking to sell his business to somebody who's looking to do, for example, a roll-up, or somebody who's, if he's looking to sell his business to me, I may not be able to offer him as much of an economic harvest as if one of the big reinsurers, for example, comes to him and says, look, Leon, We love your business. We want to roll out into the Caribbean, roll out into other jurisdictions, and so we're going to pay you a huge multiple, right? So it's really hard to just come up with value based on without understanding context, and that's critically important. That's a lot of information.
No, it's a lot of information, and listeners, we got hopefully you got that in. I mean, you know, there's various ways to start a business, and one of the ways is well, always you have to have an exit strategy, but with that exit strategy, this is what I'm hearing, or strategies, because you might have multiple, right? You can have more than one, correct?
I would argue yes.
You know, ideally, it could be prioritized in terms of what you want. Ideally, I want, you know, my daughter, my son, combination of two or all of them, to go ahead and take this business on. Like you said, they might not want it. It might be a skill set situation, or beyond the skill set, little to no desire. So then you need to have a secondary and maybe a tertiary. But the point is, these things are important to consider and have not only just one exit strategy, but consider what you can do in terms of maximizing your return when you leave this business. And I think that's what it's about.
May I speak to that a bit?
Yeah.
So to speak to sort of fundamentals and first principles.
And we have a question next. I think I saw. Sorry, we have a question next. I just want to
absolutely.
Get back.
Speak to fundamentals and first principles. I don't know that the actual specific exits. I don't know that many folks you know, Leon gave an example of somebody who knew that their plan was to build a business from X to Y to this stage and then to exit. That's a very sophisticated perspective, right? And that's generally somebody who's been well seasoned and has already had some success in observing other people through those different life stages of a company. What I would suggest is that the fundamental key to this for me is build a business that can survive without the founder. That's what start with the end in sight means to me, right? If somebody can do that, then that checks a whole bunch of boxes. That then is a business that's saleable. That's a business that can be passed on to some other individual. It makes all the potential exit strategies very achievable, or a lot more achievable. That's what that's sort of the essence of it for me.
That is my phrase for the month. I'm going to keep this one. I like it because I believe this 100%. In fact, this is what I use in terms of structuring businesses that you know, I want to create. Is maybe I can rephrase it. Is this business built so that the founder is not the lifeblood of the business? And I can rephrase it back to the original, which you said, Kumi Bradshaw, quote unquote, build a business that can survive without the founder. I mean, that has so much value. It's huge value, fundamental entrepreneurship value.
Ideally, flourish without the founder.
Yeah. Founder, beginner. So okay. So let's get back. Let's get to this here. I don't know about you guys, but I think this is so enlightening. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry,
I have a very quick question.
Yes.
And it's something that I probably should have asked offline, but since we're all here, I just want to get just an idea in terms of the audience that we do have. Are these new entrepreneurs, or is it a mixture of seasoned entrepreneurs, or in terms of the attendees as well?
I don't know.
No idea.
I don't know. Okay. And that's what makes it most intriguing and exciting. I don't know.
It's not that we're flying blind. All of the information is relevant. I just wanted to just have an idea if you do that.
Yeah. No.
So just looking through, I mean, I can see that there's quite a few established businesses that have joined on with us. Some big, some small. And then I do see as well some people that have reached out about starting a business as well. So it's a good mix of people.
Great question, Doc, by the way. Okay, so let's move to one of the questions that we have here. I think, at what point is goodwill nullified? Or can goodwill be strategized to not actually play a role in valuation? I can read again. At what point is goodwill nullified? Or can goodwill be strategized to not actually play a role in valuation? And you know what? On a just for the organizers, because we've got some of the BDC crew listening, and I'm just going to air it out. You know, it will be great to have supplementals in voice, so that person could potentially draw down on detail in terms of this question.
Yeah.
Maybe build some context, and that's done best through sort of a verbal banter interaction vibe. But BDC admin, that's what we're talking about. Anyway, what do you think?
Wow, you know, it's interesting. Bermuda's an interesting place because, and again, we're talking about, obviously businesses in the domestic space. We addressed the question in terms of, trying to pull the individual away from the business and, allowing it to sort of like stand on its own feet. And that's something that I've always tried to practice to do. But part of that is the goodwill as well. In Bermuda, people know who you are, or, the word gets out that, you're part of the foundation of the business. And it's really hard to say, we're just gonna just discount or totally discount goodwill. That's only from my perspective. I'm gonna be interested to hear Kumi's perspective. But I think that in Bermuda, there is some validity. Now, whether you can put a value on that, I'm not sure if you can really put a value on it. But, for instance, back in the day, you had the Trimmingham name, and that was a huge name in the retail space. And you knew that when you went there were excellent products, and that was the goodwill. Now, how much did that play in terms of the transaction for the company? We don't know because they're no longer around. So I think goodwill is also, a part of that equation. I just don't know what percentage of it is. What do you think, Kumi?
So I'm going to start with just trying to define goodwill, because I think where a lot of confusion arises is because folks have different understandings of what it really is. My understanding of goodwill and the accounting definition of goodwill is it's the amount paid in acquisition of a business over and above the net value of the assets, right? So, for example, if you have a company like Coca-Cola, right? And Coca-Cola has a transaction, well, I shouldn't use Coca-Cola because it hasn't been sold. If you have a company that generates a huge amount of profits, but it's the book value of its assets or the net value of its assets are very limited. So I got to think of something. Let's say a service company, right? A service company, you've got a company that has a bunch of contracts, but really doesn't have a bunch of equipment and machinery. One would expect, and it's highly profitable. Let's say a lottery, right? A lottery company. The value of the machines for printing lottery tickets or for what have you is next to nothing. But the company has huge margins, and it sells for a big number. At that point, once the transaction's been closed, and let's say the value of the equipment is $1 million, but the company sold for $500 million. When this transaction's been sold, the next owner, the balance sheet will show $499 million of goodwill and $1 million of assets, of hard assets, right? So the job of the person who's looking to sell the business is to argue that there's this thing called goodwill. There's this magical thing called goodwill, for which I should be paid over and above the net value of my assets. And they should believe that because they're building their business and they're building a customer base, et cetera, et cetera. The job of the person who's acquiring the business is to say, no, these are the hard value of the assets, and I may be willing to pay you somewhat of a premium, but I'm not willing to pay you as much of a premium as you're asking. So I think the first step is understanding what goodwill is.
So,
Did that make sense?
Examples here, because I think goodwill is a that's an interesting
Can I
topic.
just ask you?
That's a major component when selling a business or figuring out excuse me, the value of your business. Everybody understands. Look, you got the net value of your assets is X because there is a straight line formula. Goodwill is this sort of hairy-fairy formula to it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I guess you could put some sort of formula to it, but so what is good? Like, give me some examples of goodwill. I mean, is goodwill? I got a lot of hits on Facebook. Is that goodwill?
I wouldn't pay for it.
Right. Okay. Is goodwill? I got 1 million followers. I mean, is that goodwill?
So, okay, can I just speak to something really quickly?
Sure.
And this again circles back to stuff we were talking about before. So again, Leon, sorry to put you in the hot seat. Let's say we have Leon has his business, right? Or the business which involved Moongate, and right now Moongate's financial statements will show whatever they show, right? And somebody who's coming in may say to Leon, "Look, I want to pay you X for this business." The fact of the matter is that, as we talked about, and this is where it gets so nebulous, Leon will have a customer base, an existing customer base already. Leon has something, this mysterious, awesome new product or service he's going to roll out later in 2021. Now, the fact of the matter is that even if we look at what the historical numbers are for Leon's business, Leon can take whatever this product is and roll it out immediately to his existing customer base, right? That will change his numbers from 2020 to 2021, hopefully dramatically in the positive direction, right? He can argue, if someone were to come to Leon right now and say, "Look, I want to buy your business," and they look at the numbers for the past numbers and they project going forward based on the information that they have, Leon can say, "No, my number has to be bigger, and here's why my number has to be bigger, because I can continue to accelerate my growth for economic return going forward, because I can just start tacking new services and products onto this." And he can argue that that's goodwill, right? He can argue the quote unquote goodwill argument. He can have the quote unquote goodwill argument.
Good example.
I like. Again, guys, if you have any questions, I'm going to move on from goodwill. I think we put some good info behind that, some good understanding. If not, again, hit us up with the chat. Let me find another question here. Okay. What is the recommended way? I need to sell my business. I want to sell my business, or at least I'm leaning in that direction. What is the best way and means to get that done? I mean, how do I go about it?
How do you start?
Yeah.
Look at the business as if you were looking to buy the business, I guess is the start. So the first thing you need to do is to have information that's verifiable and accurately represents what the operating conditions and economic conditions of the business. So that means if you don't already have one, you need to get an accountant, bookkeeper, somebody to put together your financial statements. That's the very first starting point for me. Second thing is make sure that you have all your documentation.
I'm sorry, Timmy. That is a huge point, and keep that thought. I know you will. But that is, and I tell every client that I can, it's your financials for so many reasons. Not only for management data going forward and growing your business and understanding, where you can cut expenses and where you can add revenue streams and all other information that the financial, dare I say, Bible gives you, because it gives you an insight in the future, the past, and everything in between. But you're saying now that the financial statements is a key component to understanding the value of your business.
If you don't have financial representative financial records, and the buyer can't back out a feel for your business, you're likely not going to extract the maximum value. That's where I speak for. You're not going to get what you might otherwise get.
Yeah.
Beyond financial statements, look, again, I don't remember what exact quotable or whatever it was I gave you, but if you want to sell a business, so forget about the seller. The seller needs to wear a buyer's hat. If I want to buy a business, I need to understand what the business is worth for me, which means I need to understand what the risks are in the business. I need to understand how to actually operate and how to do the stuff in the business. I need to understand if there are personnel in place. I need to understand if there are agreements in place. So if you have contracts, make sure those are documented. If you have leases, all types of operating agreements, make sure those are documented. Ideally, make sure they're scanned in and available electronically so they can be shared easily. All the sort of friendly, familial, or ace boy agreements need to be documented. It's as simple as that. Because Leon's seasoned enough to have seen these sorts of situations, as would you guys. You'd see somebody who's in a business, they have a relationship, and Bermuda's so small, right? And it's the fabric of our community is so intertwined. So somebody has a relationship with their landlord, and I come in there and I want to buy the business from that person, but I don't have the same relationship with the landlord because I'm not their landlord's nephew or niece or whatever. Well, I'm obviously not their niece. I'm not their nephew or what have you. Sorry. And so all of a sudden, my rent, instead of being $2,000 a month, is now going to be $5,000 a month. Well, I'm not going to pay, because my profits wouldn't be the same. I'm not going to pay the same. I'm not going to have the same expected profit as the person who was already in there. So everything needs to be documented and transferable as well.
Yes.
And then I guess part of the question is going to be then, okay, now I've got all this information together. Well, ideally, you want to have somebody who's maybe going to help you in even understanding what you need to put together. That's, I'm not trying to, sell services here, but that's something that we do help with. We do provide a due diligence checklist, and with past clients, what we do is we basically tell them how to start putting the information together, put it together in the package, and beyond that, it's also understanding the lay of the land as to who the potential acquirers might be or the potential transaction partners might be. So that means having relationships with the financing sources, having relationships with folks in industry and external to industry, and also being able to manage the potential transaction. It's next to impossible to, well, it's very difficult to sell a business confidentially in Bermuda between parties who do not know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Right? To have a transaction between parties who do not know each other. And generally speaking, if I'm a seller, unless I have a strategic buyer who's out there, with whom I already have a relationship, who's been knocking my doors for 3 years already, right? And I've always been thinking of them as part of my exit plan, right? If I don't have that, I need to know who else is out there who might be willing to offer me a smooth transition and a good value for my business. And generally, I might want to look to have somebody to help me broker that transaction.
Kumi, you mentioned something about you're not trying to sell your services. And I would say this in a response. As entrepreneurs, we're inundated with stuff to do to keep the wheels going, right? And we are not master of all.
I'm not trying to be selfish.
This is a complex situation, and this this is you know, it goes back. You know, the challenge that entrepreneurs have sometimes, ones that I speak to, and even myself at some stage, was that I'm an entrepreneur. I can do it all. And you know, you dilute the success of your outcomes by wearing yourself thin, right? If you don't know it, you know, sometimes it's better to pay for the service. And I say this, one, to put a plug in for you, obviously, because I love your services. Two, but also to let entrepreneurs know, those listening, you know what, and those, you know, and I say this from experience talking to my clients. If you don't know financials, go out and get some help, even if it's temporarily. It might hit the pocket, might put you close to red, but it's important to get the expertise so that you can focus on the business at hand and operations, and have somebody else who is an expert best execute what needs to be done.
I would agree with that. Absolutely. If you need
I
professional
know,
services,
and
pay
I
for
know
them.
I've been there.
Beyond that, actually, a key point for business owners to know, as far as people trying to sell their own businesses, that can be really, really challenging. It's very hard to separate the emotional of, you know, I was up Sunday night at 8 p.m., you know, doing whatever in this business back in the day, and I did all of this. You know what the business owner, what the new acquirer cares about that?
Bottom line.
Pretty much
Maybe
zero.
Minus, right?
Yeah, maybe minus actually. What they care about with your business is what your business is going to do for them and for their family, right? They don't, just speaking very frankly. So often, and you require a level head understanding of the different parties and the different parties' motivations to be able to bridge the gap and to get those Venn diagrams across and to get the transaction to close. And the success rate for businesses, even if you have an interested buyer and seller with financing in hand, you're still looking at less than a 50% close rate. I just want to communicate how challenging it can be to close.
Why would that? Why would you say that? Why is that the case?
You have seller's remorse. You have challenges because the transaction isn't closed smoothly, and so something happens in the operating environment. So again, I'm going to sell my restaurant in December of 20, whatever year it was. Feels like it's been 40 years. December, right before we were aware of COVID, and we had an agreement and the MOU, memorandum of understanding, and we had an agreement and all that signed up. And then they started, we had to close the country down. Well, look, mate, I can't give you that 20 million for that, transaction anymore. In fact, you know what? I'm going to hold off and sit on this for a little bit. And then, that falls apart. That's just the reality of what happens. Life happens. People get sick, family members get sick, etc. People become distracted. A key employee leaves, a new competitor arrives on the scene. The numbers all of a sudden start to look different. Or, oh wow, I agreed to sell my business for X, and I just had an amazing quarter, right? Now we need to see those numbers shift a little bit. Well, then now go back, have another conversation with the financing sources, etc. Go back through the rigmarole. If you don't know how to manage all of that, you just come off track.
Yeah, you've hit on a lot of saucy points. It's very important. I have a philosophy that always let the pros do what they do best, and if you can't afford it, it saves you so much in the long run. And I mean, we had restaurants back in the day, and we faced a very similar situation. Whereas we actually spoke to you, Kumi, and we had a decent valuation of the business. We had someone lined up to buy the business, and for some reason, we had two deals fall apart. And even though you may have contracts in place, you may have, like I said, a memorandum of understanding, you may have a purchase and sales agreement actually, sometimes, you know, you want to fight that, but again, it's Bermuda's small. You don't want to fight against people in Bermuda and all that sort of thing. But certainly that happens, and that's why it is very important to get the help if you have the finances and you have the ability to certainly get the help in terms of if you want to sell your business.
Awesome. Look, I just wanted to send this out to our listeners, and we're holding steady. We're not getting too much drop off, and we haven't had any drop off. That's great. I love it. But I'll tell you this, you know, if one thing you may not know is that if you write in a question, it's anonymous, right? So it could be as basic, or, you know, I sometimes, you know, even myself, I don't want anybody to think I'm, you know, this question is elementary or whatnot, but feel free, shoot anything, even if you think it's basic. It might be edification for those online. Okay, so look, Kumi, Leon, we're nearing the end time. We got about 30 minutes left. It sounds like a lot, but you know, it may not be. So, okay, let's get right to the punch. I'm ready to sell my business. Okay. Cost. I'm ready to buy. Oh, okay. Regress. I want to buy a business. Can I utilize your services, Kumi?
Yeah, I get retained. I do get retained quite a bit for buy side assistance. So we'll either provide buy side or sell side assistance. We have to choose a side. Buy side assistance is fee based, and generally buy side assistance involves so have kind of a standing relationship with somebody who's looking at doing a roll up in an industry, and part of that is involves being aware of the different players in the industry. Sorry, a roll up basically is the same strategy that was adopted by Wayne Huizenga with Blockbuster and also with Waste Management, and you've seen it with other industries. Basically, you buy businesses at a certain cost of capital. I'm trying to not use technical language. You buy businesses, you buy small businesses, a bunch of small businesses, you put them together, you get a big business, and you can sell it at an even bigger multiple. Right? That's what a roll-up is, in plain speak. Also, obviously, we've done a number of due diligence and valuation transactions. Generally speaking, somebody saying, okay, you want to do a valuation. And then the conversation really is, can you actually help me get to the end point of completing this transaction and protecting my interests? So it's not just look at what's being presented, but help me in asking the critical questions that would not otherwise be asked, right? So yes, the accounts may be correct, but is there an issue there because there's a huge obligation because this business has 50 employees who've all been on hand for X amount of years, and there's an obligation, you know, and I'm going to have to restructure this business, and all of a sudden I've got a $500,000 obligation to pay employee redundancy, right? Right. These are the hidden things that you say, oh wow, didn't think about that. Well, $500,000 is worth, you know, getting some assistance with. There are all types of, you know, thankfully, because of having helped a number of local businesses, managed to see a lot of both good and challenging circumstances, and so have some level of awareness of some of the pitfalls that might be out there. So yes, that's on the buy side.
So you do buy and sell. That's good to know.
Which is buy side and sell side. It's the same professional services. It's just either we're trying to help you structure a business so that way it's going to maximize the value that's being extracted, or on the buy side, what you want to do is protect yourself to make sure even in the actual terms of the agreement that you put together, that you're making sure again that you're protecting yourself for things that, because not everything's going to be properly documented. This is Bermuda, right? Not everything's going to be perfectly tied up in a bow. And not everybody's out there to get you either. Like, you know, let's also get away from that. But at the same time, you need to protect yourself. So it might be, okay, here's an issue. What are the issues of which I may be unaware? And can we please highlight those? So then when we put our legal agreements together, or, those things can be addressed and resolved. So everybody's interests are protected.
So for some, and definitely for myself, I'm not afraid to admit it, because I'm not afraid to admit what I don't know, because what I don't know is it's okay. There's some complexity to what you're saying, but I'm trying to drive to the next question. So the complexity almost sounds like, a lawyer, right? So, and when you talk lawyer has all sorts of, yes, positive connotations and thoughts, but then it's the $55,000 an hour. What it's going to set me back? Are all my proceeds from the sale going to be eaten up by all this time? So what's the cost? Are you similar to a lawyer in terms of cost? And I'm not trying to get detail. I'm just saying, what is what is cost, and do above and beyond your services, Kumi, do I need, or services like yourself, do I need a lawyer in addition? Is that an additional cost?
So normally what I'll do is I'll have a conversation with a potential client, and it'll just be like, look, what are you trying to accomplish? And I tend to be quite plain spoken.
And sorry, I'm going to jump in. Is that conversation, that initial conversation, sort of a
free conversation? It's not. Look, I don't have the capacity to sit down with somebody for 2 or 3 hours off the clock, because we all are here to take care of our families. At the same time, if I need to find out if it's even a fit for me to be able to help somebody. So if for example, if somebody is looking to sell a business, generally you're going to separate professional services out from your brokerage fees or your brokerage services, right? Your brokerage services are going to be a commission that's based on successfully selling the business. So when people broker, quote unquote, a business, you will only make money if you sell the business. What that means for the person who's a good person who's effective in that space is they're not going to take on businesses that they don't think are saleable, right? Or they're not going to take on businesses that they don't think are going to be, because there's a lot of work that goes in that's going to be worth the amount of effort that they put in at the end of the day, assuming that you can even get past your X% chances of succeeding in selling the business, right? With professional services, those are charged an hourly rate. And the simple fact of the matter is, the first step, we'll just have a conversation to say, is there a fit? And the question of the fit is, because if you're trying to do something which may not make sense, or which, if there's something with which I, for example, may be uncomfortable from an ethical perspective, or if you're representing information in a manner with which I'm uncomfortable, I will not take on a transaction like that. Speaking very frankly, again, I'm pretty much known for not mincing words on stuff. Yeah.
Well, I think you've given some of our listeners some understanding in terms of cost. It's not cost prohibitive. It's not astronomical. It's something that's very fair, and I'm sure, particularly, I
want to be careful. There's a cost associated. I want to be careful, Dante. There is a cost associated. So this is not, if the services that we provide are not equivalent. Do not expect the same sort of cost you'd pay a bookkeeper or an accountant, because this is not that. To give some data, I think it's 1% of AICPA members. That's members of American, I think, Institute of CPAs are actually professionally accredited for business valuation. So that's where some of my alphabet soup goes, right? I don't do accounting. I have a finance background, but I don't do accounting. I don't put together historical records for people. That would be conflicting, and it's also something that's not of interest to me. What I do is I work with folks like lawyers, accountants, etc., and I will actually work with clients to help them understand how best effectively to work with their lawyers, you know, because lawyers' responsibility is not to, this is my language, is not to deduce all the things that could potentially go wrong in a transaction. The lawyer's responsibility is to help draft the documents, to close the transaction, and to protect the client's interest. My responsibility is in plain language to communicate to the client, here are the things that are potentially of concern, and here's how we're going to address them. My job is to translate.
Okay.
I'm very comfortable in the finance, legal space as far as understanding some of that stuff. But my job is to translate it to somebody who's just trying to build their business and sell it.
And translate and provide direction. Direction is key. They're coming to you. You can translate what's going on, and then you can provide direction whether they need to go to any other service provider or support. Okay, so
Dante, just jumping in. We had a couple questions.
Okay.
I'm just gonna get them out real quick. So I have one question. I think it was more when we were discussing the valuating a business, and what sort of goodwill looks like. So I'm just going to quickly jump back. And one of the questions that came in after the pandemic, assessing a rebound, how does that actually show the viability and add value to the business?
I didn't understand the question. I didn't hear the question very well, actually.
Sorry, so I'll repeat it. So after the pandemic, assessing a rebound, how does that actually show the viability and add value to a business? So I don't want to take the asker's question out of context, but what I'm assuming is sort of when we look at the restaurant space, after that drop off, if let's say now I'm in the position where I have to sell my business, looking at the rebound over the next year, the influx of people coming in over 2021, 2022, can that be, and it's just an assumption, is that factored into when you're selling a business? Can you say, well, the people are coming back, my business is worth more? And I'll leave that for.
I'll ask. Leon was in the restaurant space, so maybe he'll be able to speak on that.
Yeah, and well, the restaurant space is really interesting because you have different aspects or facets of the restaurant. The people who are doing takeouts are doing a booming business, and so and that's what we had. We had the takeout space, and now I wish I still had it because it's rip roaring right now. But for the others where you have to sit down and you have to get 50 seats a lunch hour or 50 seats for a dinner, it's definitely more challenging. And so you have that nuance. So to put the question in perspective, no one has a crystal ball in terms of what's going to happen in the future. And the thing about assets and these valuations, it comes down to the example that Kumi gave me earlier. How much am I willing to pay for it? One thing about entrepreneurs, and is we have a great talent, is that sometimes you can see the vision of things as well. And so you can say, listen, we took over a space, down on Front Street, and it caters to the tourists or whatever the case may be, which ironically we had that as well, and I failed in that. But and I anticipate that this is what's going to happen. So sometimes, because the valuations are a bit less now, you may have an entrepreneur to say, I'm going to buy this now. So with the vision that it's going to come back. It's sort of like some people look at stocks the same way. Netflix went to $25 and now it's gazillion. So an entrepreneur may say, with the economy being on the rebound, and I don't have to pay the 400 grand for that restaurant now, I should be able to, as long as they have to have the intuition and also the help even with people like Kumi to say, listen, this is where I think it's going to go in terms of the economy. So it's not a simple question to answer because the economy has a lot to do with the decisions in terms of making some of these purchases. But if they anticipate that it's going to come back, and it depends on what space you're in, that could provide some valuation or increased valuation for that business if you're selling it. And obviously, a buyer is always going to try to get it as low as they can. That's that's just um, elementary, buy and sell. And so so there's always going to be this a to and fro going on. But yeah, I mean, this is term that we have in finance that historical performance has no bearing in terms of the future. I could sell Moongate tomorrow and it won't happen, but if I leave, then all of a sudden all the sales are going to go down because some people are so integral in terms of their business. A mechanic shop. So you have the main mechanic who's going to be leaving, and so now I have to go and hire a mechanic, and is he going to be as good and all this other type of stuff? So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, but the entrepreneur also has to, because that's what we are. We're entrepreneurs, and we're going to make those type of decisions, which include an element of risk. But I always say risk is when you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. Okay,
if I can add, because this has been going through my mind in terms of what the landscape looks like today with COVID, with pandemic vibe going on in terms of sales and buys of business and valuations. And one thing that came to mind, I was talking to my mentor, guys, that's a little plug for you guys as entrepreneurs, or a little advice. Everybody needs a mentor. Get a mentor. If you don't have one, get one. Somebody that you respect, somebody's a little head further than you and successful. You need to grab a hold of those persons, and by any means, don't stalk them, but just see if you can get a mentor. But the point is, when that question was asked, what came to mind is if you're a serial entrepreneur, if you're somebody thinking, oh, I need to make, what can I do? What can I get a skill set to build a business or whatnot? Think one thing that should be in the back of your mind, particularly with the pandemic that we've seen, and knowing that, potentially something like this, not necessarily a pandemic, but something that happens that affects most of us or a lot of us, is revenue elasticity. That means, your revenue is not necessarily dependent on major shifts in our social and economic vibe. Now, it's very hard to get, well, not very hard. These opportunities are out there, but you got to seek them out. For instance, I'll give you an example. Stuff, now I'm going to be very, very open-minded, or dare I say vague, but things that are necessities for persons. Food is one of them, but stuff like trash collection, stuff like, irregardless of what's going on, it has to happen. And those are one things that you can look at in terms of if you're a new entrepreneur and you're thinking about some ideas, and you want to, or you're a seasoned entrepreneur and you're thinking about, what could be my next revenue stream. Think about revenue streams that are inelastic, meaning regardless of what's going on, it has to happen. It has to happen. And that will maintain your value of your business. And in fact, I think it, it could have an exponential effect on the valuation, because persons who see or want to buy your business know that your business will hold its revenue stream regardless of pandemic type stuff. Anyway, that's my little bit. Okay, so we got almost 10 minutes left. Dennis, do we have any other questions?
No more in the chat yet, but I do have a question as well. And this is sort of something, that me and Dante get asked very frequently. And as well as myself, I'm launching a business next month. But from you guys, someone who is just starting a business for the first time, what are three, main things to sort of think about right now during sort of starting a business during these times? What would sort of three sort of key points to pass on? Because I do see a few people in the chat that are starting businesses. So what would be sort of three things to ensure is considered when launching the business?
You wanna try that, Kumi?
I'll try with one.
I'll come.
I believe in brutal honesty, both with oneself and primarily with oneself first, in order to be honest with others. I think it's critically important to understand, to be able to assess oneself and see what one's attributes are, strengths and weaknesses, and where there are things that are not strengths, to get help. So that might mean partnering with other folks. Obviously, make sure that's appropriately compensated. Don't leave things vague. Oh, that's the second thing. Make sure things are documented. Don't leave things vague. So yeah, you're not going to do everything yourself. We're not. None of us are Superman, woman, etc.
Yeah, and I mean, you're talking about like starting entrepreneurship, and yeah, that was so many years ago.
You know what I mean?
We're all smiling because, are you sure you want to do this?
Yeah.
I mean, Dante, one of the and Dennis, one of the things that I had to do with the BDC, one of these sessions that I had with them, it was a one-on-one class. And one thing that resonated with everyone in terms of starting a business, and it's a colloquial expression, but it always holds true even to this day. And it's really find a need and fill a need.
Yeah, absolutely.
As Kumi mentioned, you have to match this with your skill sets. I mean, we've talked about this extensively through this discussion. But if there isn't a need for your product or service, then the conversation is going to be very short, and it's going to be a very frustrating time, for that particular employer. So one of the things, and sorry, Dante, I can't divulge everything right now, but what we've actually tested our product over the last 2 years with just small sample of the population, just to make sure that it is right. Now, obviously, we're in a position to be able to do that. With an entrepreneur who's just starting, I mean, obviously, like for instance, the pandemic, you've seen a proliferation of different types of masks and things of that nature, and I applaud those folks who have come up with these ideas, which I'm like, I would never have thought of that. And even some existing businesses have had to pivot. So some, box stores have had to say, well, we need to transition to online. So where are the trends going? So, I don't know what the product or service is, but there are a number of factors that you have to consider with all the things changing. But again, if you're not filling a particular need, you know, Sargasso Sea is one of your clients, and you know they've taken off or dropped it. You know, that's another one. They've taken off for grocery delivery, and he was like, I should have thought of that. It's always that case. But now there's a huge need because people don't want to go and mix and mingle in marketplace. So, you know, you have to give a lot of thought in terms of that product or service that you're going to offer. And again, do I have the skill set and then, you know, you have to start building the infrastructure. So there are so many different aspects of it, but it always starts with what's the big idea.
Mhm.
And from that big idea, you start developing the product and the pricing of it. And that's where I mean, we're diverging a little bit, but you know, that's where I had challenges in terms of coming up with the right price for the product that I want to offer because it's never been offered. And you're sort of like getting into an unknown. What is the market willing to bear in terms of the pricing for it? And that's a challenging thing to do. When I had just a small example, when I had the restaurant and we were selling I had the pasta restaurant, and what we did was we used to sell the smokes for like $7.50, and I was like, if we move it up by 50 cents, we can make this much more margin. Just basic math, right? And I'm telling you, when we moved it up 50 cents, there was an outcry, an outcry. I mean, now they charge $15 for it, but I'm saying, you it's very difficult to say go up or go down in price. So you have to make sure that your pricing is commensurate with your product or service and whether price it can. That's what I want to say about it.
Guys, look, I think, you know what? We could probably chat for another hour. I wouldn't like to because I got to go. But in any rate, I mean, I would like to because I'm enjoying it, but I do have to go. And I think most people have to go, right? So I mean, that's a good look. I'm going to close it. Three things, right? The last question was, what, Dennis, you said, what are the, three things? Say it again real quick. Three things that you would.
Think about right now.
Yeah, to think about starting a business right now.
Yeah. So, okay. So right. So I will add one, and it's a big one. It's a main one. Is understand financials. You have an idea. You think it's going to work. You know what? You've got to do a cash flow projection, and that has to be a credible cash flow projection with assumptions that are credible. You know, assumptions in terms of revenue, number of clients coming in, or things sold. Where did you get that from? Beyond that, you have to know what a cash flow projection is. You have to know what a profit loss is. You have to know what your balance sheet potentially could be or should be. And if you don't know that, then your idea is, it's floating in the water without a motor. Right? You need that. You need that. And I tell all my clients, I know you do, Dennis, the financials is your roadmap. One. Two, we talked about, Leon, you talked about problem solving. You talked about who entrepreneurs are. Who we are problem solvers. We find a problem, we see a problem, we figure out solution, and then we ensure that it's the right solution and we implement. Bam. And that's a good segue into the course that we're hosting in February 2nd, coming up this February of next week, Tuesday. It's called Think Like an Entrepreneur, guys. If you're a seasoned entrepreneur, you're thinking about a new revenue stream or a new idea you want to get out there, or you're a new entrepreneur, you had this idea in your mind for umpteen years, you want to get it out there. TLE, Think Like an Entrepreneur, is it. You get to hang out with me and Dennis. We have a lot of fun, and it's a fun course, very interactive. and it's not your typical lecture. It's an interactive course built in with a lot of visual, video, a little bit of reading. I'm a video visual guy. I'm not a lot of reading guy, so that's why I'm saying that. But if you like reading, it's probably not geared for you. But point is, regardless, you enjoy it. And thirdly, I want to thank a big thank you to Kumi Bradshaw, Firm Advisory. You can hit them up on firmadvisory.com if you want to dive in a little bit deeper. And also, you've got Leon Bascom, Moongate Insurance. If you want to get some supplemental insurance to boost your hip or future care, kit it out, and you check him out. Dennis, always a pleasure, my good friend. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
And much love. Much love, much love. Guys, BDC.bm, hit us up. We've got so many learning opportunities and so much more for you in terms of stuff we have to offer, from financial products and you name it. We love entrepreneurs. Big peace. Love.
Take care all.